Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's panel, where we're all very lucky to have two very exciting co-productions that are here with their creative teams to share with you their journey from idea to the stage, screen, finished film, almost in some cases. I am Denitsa. I am the head of the UK Global Screen Fund, and I have with me the producers behind Leonora in the Morning Light, which is a biopic of British surrealist painter Leonora Carrington. It's a co-production between Germany, Mexico, Romania, and the UK, directed by Thor Klein, which is currently in post-production. So I have with me James Heath, who's the UK co-producer from Mallinson Television Pictures and the newly launched Randan entity. I also have Lena Verma, who's the German majority producer from Dragonfly Films. I also have a very special co-production that is actually launching in Cannes, and you'll be able to see it on Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. at Debussy Theatre in the Uncertain Regards section. It's September Says, which is a feature-length directorial debut of Ariane Labed. And the film is a co-production between Ireland, UK, and Germany. We're very lucky here to have the Irish producers. So we have Mark Byrne, who's representative of Sackville Film and Television Productions. We have Rachel Dargavel, who's the UK producer from Crybaby Films. And we have Chelsea Morgan-Foreman from Element Pictures. Welcome. Before we start today's session, for the benefit of our audience and those in the audience who may be visually impaired, and as this talk is also recorded and is available on our website, screenuk.org/industry, we will start with a quick description, visual descriptions of ourselves. I will start first, always the hardest. So I'm Denitsa. I am an Eastern European woman. I would like to describe myself as perpetually young. I have a dark hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a black top, and I'm experimenting with leopard print a little bit in my skirt. I will now allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves and try to outdo me in my intro. And to make it extra hard for them, I'm also going to ask them a few questions. So can you each introduce yourself, describing yourself visually, and also tell us, is this your first co-production? And is this your hardest co-production to date? James, we'll start with you.
I'm James Heath, and I have short brown hair, swept back. I'm a middle-aged white man wearing a light blue shirt and blue jeans. This was our first official co-production. We'd done unofficial co-production with North America before. So yes, it was our most difficult co-production to date, and hopefully our most difficult and complex for a little while. I'd like a little bit of a break before we make one as complex as this.
Thank you, James. I'm Lena Verma. I'm a super young woman with a green dress, green eyes, and blonde long hairs. It is my fourth feature film, and 3 of them were international co-productions. And this one, was kind of the most, I say complex, not difficult, but very complex. And I'm sure we tell you more about how complex it was in a minute.
Thank you. And now the team of September Says.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Morgan Hoffman. I am a white cisgendered woman with bright blonde hair that matches the color of my dress, which is very overdressed for this particular occasion, but we have somewhere else to be. I'm covered in feathers, and I have green eyes, and no voice, but you can hear that.
My name's Rachel Dargavel, and I've got short brown hair, hazel eyes, and I'm wearing a black gala dress because I'm going to a gala screening afterwards. And this isn't my first co-production, but sadly, all the co-productions that I've worked on have been incredibly complicated.
But very rewarding. You'll come to that.
But very rewarding.
I realized I skipped over that question. I should say it's my first co-production as a producer, and I would echo James that I hope that it's a little bit easier moving forward.
I'm Mark Byrne. I'm an Irish white male with brown hair and blue eyes. And similarly, I'm wearing a tuxedo shirt and a tuxedo because we're heading off to the Kinds of Kindness premiere as soon as this is over. So Yeah, you'd asked before, was this the hardest co-production? I always think probably the last one you did is the hardest co-production. I worked in the film board for many years, so I've been involved in many, many co-productions. I think this was one of the most difficult because at one stage we had 13 different pieces of financing in it. But on the plus side, the co-producers didn't end up suing each other, as happened on other productions. So far, it's not
Yeah.
the worst. Yes.
There may be a lot of ideas for questions in question time.
Yeah,
So
watch
feel
out,
free to ask
Chelsea.
about this litigation thing. That's great. Thank you all. Now we can all relax because this was probably the hardest question, having to describe yourself and talk about this co-production experience. But I want to now examine a little bit more in detail the story of these projects and how they came about and how what we see now, which is a finished version with 3 to 4 partners. Was this always the version? Did it change? How long did it take? So maybe if we can start by talking about how each of the projects originated, where the idea came from, and was the UK always intended to be part of this project? And we start with you, Chelsea.
Sure. So September Says began life as Sisters, which is a novel by Daisy Johnson. And it was brought to our attention by Rose Garnett when she was head of BBC Film. And brought it to us at Element and thought this would make a great adaptation, and particularly perhaps one for a debut female filmmaker. Not exclusively, but it felt like that was a good one to start a good place to begin. And we had worked with Ariane Labed as an actor previously, but her short, Ola, had just premiered in Cannes, and we were all blown away by it. And we knew she was eager to do her first feature, so we shared the book with her. Hoping that she would choose it to be her first feature. And she did. There was talk for a while of whether or not we'd bring on another writer because English is not Ariane's first language. But she ultimately decided she wanted to adapt it herself as well. So that was a whole process too, where she wrote the script in French, we had it translated, we'd sort of polished up. But there were very few drafts, so we didn't have to do too much of that. And it was always intended to have a UK element. We developed it with the BBC. It's a British writer. The story takes place in Britain. So that was always, Britain and Ireland, where Element was based, is always part of the equation.
Thank you. And how about Leonora Says? In the Morning Light, sorry.
Yeah, so with Leonora in the Morning Light, I optioned the novel in 2016 while I was shooting an Indian film in Delhi. And then I shot another film before that because it was already in financing, another international co-production called Adventures of a Mathematician. And then we started financing Leonora in the Morning Light, I would say in 2020, which was not easy because of the pandemic. So it took a while. Yeah, I mean, the good thing is it's quite a long while now since I optioned that novel. And since yesterday, Leonora Carrington is the highest selling British female artist and one of the 5 in the world highest selling female artists.
Amazing. So 10 years ago, you knew this will happen time
Almost.
for this year. So watch out in theaters near you in the fall, hopefully in festivals. Yes, fingers crossed. Thank you. In terms of the process that goes behind putting co-productions together, and particularly the creative process, before we dig into the financing, I wanted to ask you a few questions, and I want to start with the team behind September Says. The 2 key actresses are very young. They're very key to the story. They do an amazing job on screen. How easy was the casting process, and also through the lens of obviously having a director who brings a certain sensibility as an actor herself? How was that creative experience altogether for the team?
Well, I wouldn't say it was easy to find the 2 of them, but it wasn't. We weren't tearing our hair out. We had a really brilliant casting director, Isabella Adolphin, who just trawled all over the UK to find these girls, and Mia stood out right away for us as one of the really top actors. And then actually subsequently to September Says, Rachel and I co-produced exec produced a TV show last year that also has Mia in a lead role. And Pascal is also someone who she really popped in the audition tapes. And Ariane went through a few in-person casting sessions with different groups of girls and trying different groups together. But she thought about Mia and Pascal very early on and kept coming back to them. So it wasn't, we didn't have to dig too deep, but that was in part due to Isabella's great work.
And the chemistry between them is obviously amazing. We can already see it in this clip. What was the experience of Ariane on set with them directing? How did this organically happen, or was it a lot of rehearsals, a lot of pre-work?
We had a week of rehearsals. It was unfortunately cut down a bit because everyone kind of got COVID in a row leading up to the production. So as soon as one actor was okay, then another one got sick. But Ariane is such a joyful director. I think she really brings a lightness and a joy and a love for the film and a passion for the story to the set, and it was really infectious for everyone. And Mia and Pascal, really reacted well to that, and they're truly dear friends now. Like they meet up all the time. They're very, very close. I'd watch them on set, and if Mia finished a scene and she thought Pascal was behind her and she wasn't there, she'd look around and say, "Where'd she go?" It was they were very, very close through the whole thing, and hopefully will continue to be.
Great, thank you. And similarly, in Leonora in the Morning Light, there's a key female lead role. How difficult was it to find your Leonora?
Well, we have something in common. We have the same casting director, actually.
Round for Isabella.
Yeah. So we started to cast Leonora Carrington in 2020, and we had bigger names lined up for her. But then Olivia Winnell, who plays now Leonora Carrington, just blew us away in the casting in London. And even though she is very famous from the National Theatre, she was not that famous yet in film, but she's gonna be now. And so we went with her in 2020, and until we shot, she had a kid, and we stick with her, and I think it was the best we could ever do because she blew us away on set and now on screen. And we did have a really nice ensemble cast around her. We had a German Film Award winner, Alexander Scheer, as Max Ernst. We have Ryan Gage, another British actor who still has hundreds and thousands of followers because of The Hobbit 1 and 2. And then we have a really huge Mexican talent, Luis Gerardo Mendez, who's really big. So great ensemble around her.
And you will have a chance to see a work in progress clip of Leonora. I'm saving it for the end to give you something right before the audience questions, so you can also think about your questions. But before we talk about the rest of the journey of the co-productions, I wanted to talk about the slightly less glamorous on-screen side, which is the finance plan, which is equally important, if not a big challenge, to also getting productions on screen. So maybe staying with Leonora in the Morning Light, can you tell us a little bit about how did you put this finance plans together? There's a lot of public funds from multiple territories. How difficult was this process, and what roles did you guys play?
Extremely. I mean, I came on it fairly late, I have to say. So, we can maybe get into where I came in the Global Screen Fund and what we did from a post-equity point of view. But I was very fortunate that by the time that Lena came on with Paul, who's our other German producer, they'd done all the hard work.
Well, we kind of packaged the project, and then James and I met at the IAVE Producers Workshop end of 2021, I think that was.
Yeah.
And then 2022, we started to co-produce together. But first, Thor and I, we went to Mexico because we first wanted to find the Mexican co-producer, as it's an organic co-production, because Leonora Carrington fled to Mexico during the Second World War and became, the painter, the artist she is because of the Mexican mythology she integrated in her painting. So we went to Mexico not only to do research, but also to kind of meet as many production companies as possible. And then we found Meli Melo, who's part of the Piano independent group, and we were very happy to have them on board first. And then we had a Romanian co-producer attached because we wanted to work again with Tudor Vladimir Panduru, who's a DP, one of the best, who has been with many films to Cannes with Cristian Mungiu. And so we wanted to work with him again, and we just got a bit of money out of Romania as well, and then thankfully also from the UK, which was just a perfect fit because Leonora Carrington was British, and we have a lot of British talent. Before we started the film, Thor and I, we were mainly in Berlin, and then during COVID, we also bought a croft in Scotland, and so we're kind of
Love
an
it so
international co-production ourselves. So yeah.
Yeah, I got very confused because at IAVE, if anyone's done it, at the end of the workshops, that you get to meet various decision makers, financiers, sales agents, distributors, and this random German distributor wanted to meet me. And I was like, why does a German distributor want to meet me? I've got nothing that's relevant for that in Scotland. And I jump on Zoom, and Lena has this incredible backdrop of sky. And it turns out she wasn't in Germany at all, she was in Skye.
I'm all over the place, yeah.
This is true. So about 6 months later, we started talking about the project. And I think it was about 6 months after that we put in for the Global Screen Fund at the end of 2022. My company has a post-production component called Brick and Mortar, and we came on board with a post-equity deal to help the UK finance. The UK finance was Global Screen Fund, UK tax credit, our post-equity deal. We also had Indie Sales, who came on board with an MG as well. And then later on, Screen Scotland have kind of come in at the end with the post fund as well. So there's quite a few funders in this project. Oh, and Euromage, of course, as well.
Yeah, Euromage, we have 3 German film funds as well, and then kind of also post-investment, sound post-investment from K13, who's also here today in the audience. And then Eficine in Mexico, which is a fund that international projects can get as well. And yeah, it's like so many sources.
We could do a whole another hour just on your financing plan. Amazing. But having in mind that this talk is in the UK Pavilion, I will ask you the question of how important was this last bit of UK funding to the co-production?
I think it was. I mean, it was essential. This film had UK elements, come what may. You know, obviously Thor and Lena are now based in the UK. The cast were coming from the UK. So you know, without the Global Screen Fund, I think we would found it almost impossible to kind of close that gap that we had here. And the brilliant thing as well, I think when we got the Global Screen Fund, even though we're not part of Europe and Euromage, I think it did also help selling part of the overall package to when we did eventually go to Euromage, because we went to Euromage after we got the Global Screen Fund on board.
And also we tried to get money from France and we didn't succeed. So actually to have the UK as a co-producer was a really big thing, because France didn't give us any money. And even though it's like in the story, they hang out in Paris and south of France. Yeah, we didn't get any money from here. So UK was our savior.
We love you, France.
Time. Next time again. Thank you. And James, you said you came on board relatively late in the process. So what attracted you to this project in particular?
Its complexity. No, genuinely. I mean, we were as a company actively looking at international co-productions. So we'd done one unofficial one at that point and been developing our own projects. And I was really looking for a project that would, you know, really test us in terms of, you know, the variety of partners. I mean, there are 3 incredibly different partners involved in this film. Mexico works very differently to what Germany does, and Romania as well, very different languages. So that, in the first instance, was very exciting, because I thought we'd learn a huge amount as a company. And then Lena, I was incredibly impressed by Lena and everything she kind of had to offer, and you know, her experience at that point. And it's just an amazing story. I can't wait until people see the film. Like, it's crazy that it's not really been told on screen. I think a few people have tried to tell this story before and have kind of explored it. And I think she's a phenomenal woman, Leonora Carrington. I think people are going to be impressed by the film when they eventually see it.
I will come back to you to explore a few of the elements of what you just said. But I wanted to switch to September Says, which had, I'm sure, equally long and complicated financing structure. So I'm looking at Mark because I know he was doing all the work on that.
And similarly is a Euromage funded project, and similarly was turned down by every French funder as well. Yeah.
This was not factor of the selection of these projects. We remain in very good relationship with CNC, and you will be applying again to them, I'm sure. And you will get more funding for that.
So, just for people who don't know, so Eurimage is a funding agency that funds co-productions. And even though the UK is not part of Eurimage, you can still be a UK co-production and be eligible for Eurimage. So, as Chelsea mentioned, it was Rose Garnett in BBC Film at the time who had brought the book to our attention. So, development was funded by BBC Films, so they were the first funder that was on. And originally, this was actually intended as an Irish-French co-production, I spent about a year with our French co-producer applying for various CNC, like various regional funds, and Arte France, and got turned down for everyone. So that we spent a long time going that road, and ultimately it didn't work. And then we ended up teaming up with Match Factory in Germany as our German co-producers, and Rachel with Crybaby with the UK. And it was just a lot of funding rounds, paperwork, applications going in, and having deadlines for what we needed to meet. And then because Eurimage actually really concentrates the mind, because the Eurimage, I think is it twice a year, maybe quarterly, or maybe twice a year they actually do their applications. And to be ready for Eurimage, you have to have like 50% of the financing in place from each country. You have to have a public fund or a distributor in place in each country. And what is very frustrating is sometimes, I think was it Arte Germany, who we actually ultimately were one of the funders. Was it their deadline, or that we only found out about them 2 days after the Eurimage funding application? So there's a lot of time of just putting applications into projects. And we actually ended up being funded by Eurimage as an Irish, UK, German, Greek co-production. And again, one of the things that's interesting for a lot of the European financiers, so we had to take out a bank loan to kind of finance a lot of the production, because a lot of European financiers, you just get an offer letter from them and they say, oh no, it'll be 6 months before you get a contract. So we're having to close and shoot the film without actually having a contract in place. And a lot of the banks, that they know that's the way it works. But one of the pieces of financing we had was coming from, we had an application into the Greek Film Centre, which we thought we would have the answer to well before we started shooting. We didn't, we were in prep. We started shooting, and we were a 5-week shoot. On the Friday at the end of the first week, we got word that we'd been turned down by the Greek Film Centre. We'd no money coming from Greece. So the Greek side of our co-production fell away a week after our first week of filming. So we had to rework the financing plan, cut the budget.
While in production, yeah.
Over the first weekend of the film. Yeah. So co-productions are great.
Okay, we're making it sound a little bit very negative here. I do want to ask about this, though, because when the structure changes, especially when it's in the hectic week when you're in production, there's a need to plug a gap, but there's also a relationship, and that relationship is with your co-producing partner in the territory, be it Greek, French, that comes out of the film that they've been working on for a long time. How do you maintain that relationship and that situation for both teams? Because I think it happened to both of you. So maybe a second.
You should also, we had French partners for a while as well during that year that we were trying to go for French funding. And I think, everyone comes to it knowing that things move around and fall apart. So you just try to maintain the relationship as best you can. I mean, I think we would, our French partners were June Films at the time. It would be lovely to find something else for them. It just wasn't this particular film. So I think if everyone is a bit grown up about it and can accept it, it's too bad. But I think also in our case, it was a little bit, we were maybe a little bit lucky in that we had really done a lot of the development and the work towards building the film in-house, and so some of those were quite late in the game, so at least we weren't faced with someone who'd been on the project for 4 years and then had to pull away from it. So we managed, I think. We should also say our producer Laura Hickey, who's here as well, was very deep into some of those frantic Greek calls with Mark that week.
and just a credit to Eurimage, because we were funded as a 4-way co-production, and literally that weekend we went back to them and said, will we still get our Eurimage money? Will that fall away? Yeah. And they said they would have to, bearing in mind what happened, they would make an exception for us, and they kept with the amount of funding that they had, because that was the real worry, that if that started falling, if that fell away, then the film was sunk at that point if that had happened.
And what about you guys?
I mean, with the French, they were not as long on board, and when they couldn't get any money for us, it was just like a friendly handshake, basically. And sorry, it didn't work out. We're both sad, but that
On
was
to the
it.
next
But
one. Yeah.
yeah, but in my last production, we had a Canadian co-producer that brought some money, but it was not enough, so we had to change, actually for the UK as well, last minute. So it was a German, Polish, British co-production in the end, and there we gave her a credit because she worked a lot and she got money, but we just couldn't use it in the end. But we're still friends, so happy ending.
That's the key takeaway. We're still friends. There's always more to come in the future. I have a question for our UK co-producers, and it's about the experience of working together with your international partner and the benefits from that experience. Because we're already talking about how hard it is. The fact that after you go through this experience, you may take a break or you wish for the next one to be slightly easier, but you actually build up a lot of learning and experience. And I would like to know more about what connections it opens up. Would you do it again if you're given the opportunity? What it might have changed for your business as well? And I'm looking to James first.
Yeah, I mean, this has kind of opened up the whole nature of international co-production for us, really. You know, I was fortunate in the fact that we did a Irish co-production, you know, almost straight after we shot this, and it was a much more straightforward process because I don't want to go too much into how complex it is again, but because of had the complexity of closing this and everything else, it meant actually with that project, because it was just two partners, and both English language is the first language, it was very straightforward. And now I'm looking at finance plans for other projects where we have just say 5, 6, 7 funders, and it looks incredibly straightforward in comparison to this. So I think having done something as complex as what we have done, with the various elements and negotiating the various funders, like Euromage is a perfect example. Like Euromage has some very complex rules that you have to follow and try and fall within to actually get the funding. And even after you've got the funding, you have to kind of maintain certain guidelines. So it's making sure that you can kind of bend the rules and without kind of breaking stuff, so it all fits. And also, I think the key thing is just kind of keeping in communication with all your partners all the time. Making them aware of what's happening and what you're all doing, rather than kind of just going off and doing something separate and then kind of coming back months later and raising there's a problem. So actually, if there's any issues, we should all kind of share this problem together at a much earlier stage.
So you learn and you're better prepared for the next one as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're still not finished.
True.
Yeah.
But it's going so smoothly that James is ready already. And Rachel, you've grown in your career from an AD to a line producer to now developing films with Crybaby Films. And what is this opportunity on working on this production opened up in terms of new relationships, new focus areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is a lot of these films wouldn't get made if they weren't co-productions. It's incredibly difficult to finance a feature film, especially in the industry, the marketplace today. So I would say it is complicated, but it's incredibly enabling. You can take an idea that somewhere might not get made solely in the UK, it might get not made solely in France, and you can put that together with Germany, you can find partners, and you can actually bring your film to life and bring it to the screen. I've been incredibly lucky. My relationship with Element began in 2018 when I co-produced a film called Disobedience, and that's when we first met. Subsequently, I ended up co-producing on a film called Yuli, which was with Moderator Films, and that was with Match Factory. So then when Chelsea was working with Viola and they were looking for a UK co-producer, they both independently knew me. So then that was a good way to kind of, come into the mix. And also in terms of the people that you're working with, thinking about your strengths versus their strengths, like where you've come from. So I'm, come from quite a practical background. Chelsea's come from a developmental background. So we complement each other very well in terms of like an open skill set. And I think that, as you go through your career from, I still speak to people that I was the third AD for, and I've got a huge love for filmmaking, and I feel like this opportunity, I've since gone on and produced a film that I developed at Crybaby, but it's been produced through Element. So I've made that film this year, actually. That was in Lagos, Nigeria. So watch out for that next year. And I've got another film that's going to be a co-production with Crybaby in the Match Factory that's independent from Element. So I think you find your tribe, and I think that if you can find great collaborators and be open to collaboration, because producing can be such a, I think, a lonely a lonely job. I actually think that the great side of the co-producing and is, you know, doing things like this, meeting new people in different countries, and kind of coming together with that hive mind of, like, even when something goes disastrously wrong, having that hive mind and going, okay, it's not just on me, it's on all of us to make this work, we're going to fix it. So when we lost our funding, Chelsea and I just chatted about it with Lara and just said, what are we going to do? We're not going to stop filming. We want to keep going. We just got to make this work. And so in many ways, it feels like a bit of a weight off just your shoulders.
Just to jump in really quickly there too, Rachel said something about, the way that you have to sort of be creative and think about how you're going to piece this together can open up new ways of approaching the film as well. And when we decided that maybe it would make more sense to shoot in Ireland, and we got the great support of Screen Ireland to do that in the Section 481 tax credit, it also meant a creative change in the story where halfway through the film, the family goes to a vacation home where they're meant to be quite othered and isolated. And in the book that takes place in Britain, they just go to a seaside town. But for the film, actually making sure, feeling like they've actually gone to a new country, they've gone to a really new place, sort of underlines how lonely they are out there. So it ended up being a really valuable creative decision for the film that was driven by a really practical financing decision.
That's really interesting when actually perhaps an obstacle becomes a strength as well. And I really like this idea of, Rachel, as you described co-production, a way of finding your tribe and building this family and this network. I was wondering, when you come to work together, how do you approach the situation, especially if you're, in your case, you were working with Element not for the first time, but let's say you guys were working for the first time. Do you come with a set of agreed responsibilities that you agree on before beginning a production, or is it the organic process of developing and finding weaknesses and strengths?
I think it's organic. I think that you do, when you go into a relationship with a partner, you have done your homework. You do know, obviously Element are a very experienced production company. So there's things that, me as Crybaby, that I needed help on. I was able to ask Sackville, Mark, able to ask Chelsea, in terms of the application process or in terms of understanding finance plans or certain deadlines or spend requirements. You've got a team of people around you that actually, I think, can help you grow as a producer as well. Certainly for me as a smaller production company and, not having done as many co-productions as Mark has done in his career. So I do think that you sort of find your role within that. And like you said, it's about communication. You have to be prepared to be open and honest and, communicate with one another and, not be afraid to say, I don't really know what's going on here, or, could you explain to me, or, it's, and then you sort of just get in a rhythm together. And I think as long as you respect and are open with the people that you're working with, there's nothing, Chelsea would say, well, what do you think of this? And I'd say, I think you just need to be collaborative within that process and open to it, and it's just not a competitive thing. And then I think it naturally, I had my very specific things to do for the UK Global Screen Fund.
Well, I will ask you about that next.
Exactly.
But I also think it's very clear to know who's in charge.
Yeah.
And like, whose decision ultimately it is. And I think that certainly where most of the good co-productions we've been involved in, it's very clear, like Element doesn't tend to be the minority co-producer on things. That's just the reality. We tend to be, we focus on our own projects, so we're the main co-producer on it. And again, I kind of referenced it earlier, but we ultimately took a bank loan against some of the other co-producers funding. So we had to be in charge, it ultimately, if something happened, it came back on us. So that's why it's a case of, you have mutual approvals or you've consultation with your co-producer, but ultimately we have to be able to make the decisions because we're the ones on the hook to the financiers.
For you guys?
Yeah, I guess kind of similarly, it was very much, this was Lena's project, this was Lena's baby. You kind of packaged her, and Thor had kind of gone off and found all the necessary partners. I felt it was kind of very clear what the UK and my role within that was, but it wasn't like I was shielded from the other elements. If I kind of wanted to be exposed more to Mexico, like I was invited to go out to the Mexico shoot, I just couldn't go for one reason or another. So it was very collaborative, but at the same time, I think very acutely aware what our role in the co-production was.
And as part of your role in the co-production, obviously we can talk about the UK Global Screen Fund funding and the application process. And Rachel started talking about the business plans and the finance plans, etc. You've gone through this now successfully. For James, actually multiple strands also in the business development strand. Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about applying? And maybe to clarify for people who are not aware of what the funding is, the key parameters are it's non-recoupable grant of up to £300,000. It's very competitive. It is for production only and for feature films where the UK is a minority partner, but also for TV projects in documentary or animation only where the UK is minority or majority partner. In this case, it was both feature films with UK as a minority partner. So taking you back to those days, ages ago, that experience, that trauma of the application form, what was it like?
It's far too competitive, don't apply. No, obviously.
He's planning to come back for more funding in other projects.
I'm being very greedy. I would say it compared to other applications you have to do in the UK. Like it's funny when you look at some European applications, like we've touched upon Euromage, and I've seen the creative media application. They are incredibly detailed. The Global Screen Fund is probably one of the more detailed application forms that exists in the UK, and I think it's really important to get everything organised as much as possible beforehand and know ins and outs of your project, every little detail, the key thing they really dig down into with the Global Screen Fund is the financial side of things. The creative elements are still very important, but it is really about understanding the numbers and your business plan and making a really, really strong business case for this project, why it's important to you as a producer, your production company, and the UK as a whole, really. And I think if you have an element of doubt about your project isn't financially in a good position to apply, then maybe really think about that, because should you be applying in 6 months' time? Because if you've already applied once, I think it's probably is quite hard to go back again a second time later on, and you really should be at the point where most of your financial elements are in a really, really strong place.
And with Euromage, you can't. Euromage, you get one go at it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't go again. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you are fortunate enough to kind of get close to getting support, you'll get grilled quite hard on your project. So you do really have to know the ins and outs of it. You can't really blag it. So you have to be really close to your partners, get every little detail about how every funder works, understand it in and out, and it'll help inform your application and make you stronger producers part of it.
I mean, maybe to add to this, what I felt is really clear in the application for the UK Global Screen Fund is kind of in the application process, they tell you how much different elements count in a way. And I feel that is actually really, really helpful when you're applying with a project and okay, content in our case was a no-brainer, but maybe your content might not be the one British famous painter, but then maybe you're stronger in all the other elements. And I thought that's actually really helpful. And in other funds, it's not like that. So I thought that's really good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Before I go to Rachel, who now has some ideas about her experience already and how that compares, it is important to understand that the finance plan is an important part of the application. As James says, it's less about being, a passive producer that brings post. You have to know what your role is. The story obviously doesn't need to be very British because we look at what's the international audience potential of the project. So that's very important to have a benefit to the UK producer and a strong participation and growth and learning opportunity, but also to think about the project that resonates on the international arena. So Surrealist Painter, it's not only the Britishness of it that's actually interesting, it's the potential for a biopic around a woman that's very special, and as we said now, one of the leading Surrealist painters that has some ties to the UK, has a creative story that resonates beyond it most of all as well. And Rachel, how about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think don't, know your project, don't apply too soon. make sure that, you know, when you put that application in, you have read the application guidelines thoroughly.
Yeah, please do read the application.
Multiple times.
Walk your way through it a few times.
Exactly. And you know, and it does take time. You know, it's not just you sit down one night and you write it and you've written a masterpiece and then you submit it. You do need to spend some time revising it, reading it, rereading it, thinking about how to tick the boxes, as it were, or score the points, you know, to make sure that you're talking to all the separate areas that are actually, you know, appealing to the UK Global Screen Fund. And yeah, also there is a lot of questioning around the finance plan and viability and what happens if you lose Greece, for example, you know, like how would that, if this money doesn't come in, because I think quite often in many ways the finance is quite solid by the time you make the finance application to the UK Global Screen Fund, but also there's a lot of rolling deadlines, like Mark had said. So, you know, we wouldn't potentially know if we'd got the Meadenboard Film Fund from Germany until after we'd been granted the UK Global Screen Fund. So there's a lot of questions around, okay, so this is your finance plan, but you're not going to find out you're going to get this funding till X date. If you don't get that funding, what are you going to do? How are you going to react to that? And so I think, you know, you actually do need to know yourself, if that piece falls away, can we still make this film? You know, if that film falls away, is there a plan B? And, you know, that's often as well why you might end up switching countries, because you think, well, if it's not France, then potentially it could be Germany, or maybe you do get Germany, but that means that you can't work with another country. So I think you do need to have a really good grasp on how it all hangs together financially.
And what worked very well for us with the Global Screen Fund was we had a lot of UK elements to the project anyway. Like, so, you know, we had the 3 lead cast who come from the UK. The book was from a UK author. You know, the script was written in the UK. So we had a lot. We didn't didn't have to, you know, shoehorn the UK funding into it, because actually it was a very natural fit anyway.
Yeah.
I think even for the application process itself, you know, when you're the physical application, it's another way where you can sort of delegate to the strengths of the team as well. You know, if there's members of the team that can focus on the creative elements, and these members are focusing
people who
on
love
finance,
split budgets.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of them out there. We were fighting over that, actually. That was the main source of contention.
Yeah, and it's actually, you know, to say as well, it is a collaborative process again for the UK Global Screen Fund. You know, it's, you know, Laura, Chelsea, it was a team effort. It wasn't just me singularly sitting there, you know, penning it all. And you do, again, it just speaks to collaboration and how important that is within a co-production structure, because you do need to constantly give information to your UK co-producer, or your German producer needs a letter from the UK producer that says that they are actually indeed producing this film to prove to their people that they're applying to that actually it is valid. And so you do, you know, you do need to kind of like make sure that you've got a good structure between the companies and the producers as well, in order to fulfill obligations to funds that you may or may not receive. So that, I think that's what makes it so complicated.
And a lot of the elements, like, you know, because we were making so many applications, a lot of it is just a lot of it is duplication, like the script or the split budget or director's notes or creative notes in it. So we are doing so many applications for projects. You actually have quite a lot of this, and you use it for your next application as well.
Yeah, definitely. And to just clarify some elements that might have confused you potentially, the UK Global Screen Fund grant has to be spent on the UK elements in the budget. So that's why the more UK elements you have, and by UK elements, I don't mean that are geographically bound to the UK. It could be the 2 actresses we saw that are working in France. It could be that it's a DOP that's based in the UK working internationally. So those elements can be covered by the grant. So your potential for the grant varies with how much of UK elements you're using in your production. And also you have to have 60% of your finance plan, overall finance plan, in place before you apply. So that's why it has to be pretty strong. And then you have to have an idea of what you would do to close the remaining 40. Now, things happen. Countries come out, funds come out. Sometimes decisions are favorable, sometimes they're not. So there is scope to vary and adapt. But eventually, you should have the vision together with your partners, how you address this together. Okay, time for audience questions. There's one over here, and there's a mic coming your way.
I wanted to ask how much of the aesthetic and the script and the director's vision is being negotiated during the discussions finance plans and new partners coming in, and do they want to read what impact are they allowed to have on the original vision of the first producer, or do they have, in your experience?
I mean, this is like the ongoing question of film, isn't it? What is the value of a film? You read a script. At what point do you work out what the budget is? Do you say we think we can raise this amount of money for this film, or do you go, okay, we're going to budget this film and then try and go off and find it? I mean, I don't think Thor or like you never kind of like, there's not a negotiation around the creative vision when you're putting together things like finance plans. But of course, when you're actually on the ground and we've got a pot of money that can only get stretched so far. It's not an infinite amount of money, and you kind of have continued conversations about what's doable within that, and it's always give and take.
Were you asking about the kind of input the co-producer can have on the creative?
I'm specifically asking, for example, about the script. Does the script go through rewrites as each producer comes on board? And how? Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
I would say, on the whole, probably no. However, I would think that if you, as a co-producer, especially like a minority co-producer, you read the script and you enjoy it, and you have a good and open relationship, there's no hard and fast rules that would say you're not allowed to have an opinion on the script. So you'd be able to say, openly talk to Chelsea about that. However, I wouldn't, as a minority co-producer, if you didn't really love the script, then you probably wasn't the project to back. It's probably not one for you. I think it does need to speak to you in the stage, in the raw stage that it comes to. But I think you'd be open to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you always want, if anything will make something better, it's always good to hear things. But I suppose my role particularly in this would have been the sort of filter and funnel for that, because I've been working so closely with Ariane for so long, so I could hear the other opinions and the other thoughts and feed them through when I thought that they actually were going to be useful and help. And also ones that I knew that someone who maybe hadn't been with the project for 4 years, I knew why we moved away from that idea, but someone new to it might, so it's an organic thing again. But I think it kind of goes to also what Mark and James were saying earlier, of knowing who the lead on the project is and sort of respecting that as part of the collaboration. And that's why you step into it.
The only time I've experienced that happens to be where like a UK set project ends up being relocated to Ireland.
Yeah.
And then you might bring on an Irish writer to do a pass just for the authenticity of it. Like that's the only time, because it tends to be people are just backing the project. Like they want to be involved working with that filmmaker. So they're excited about it. They're not really trying to change it, other than for authenticity reasons, maybe.
But around casting, you're obviously, you kept creatively.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, I mean, around casting, it's not like you're not asked your opinion. You're creative. You're in the loop. It's like, but I do think there's a unified vision as well. I think that if as a co-producer you read a script and you go, oh my God, I love that film, and it feels like something I'd like to be involved in, then actually there is a sort of kind of collegiality between the producing partners already, which means that then in a general tastemaker sense, you're excited about the same sorts of people. So I think actually by the time you get to that point, you're already pretty sure that, you're going to have the same or similar taste. And if you don't, it's not. If you like two different people, again, like Chelsea said, you defer to the majority producer. I
think also bringing in head of departments can shape a vision as well from the co-producer side. So bringing in someone, if, for example, production design is not set yet, and then you as a minority partner come in and say like, well, I've worked with this person and it's a really great person, maybe you want to consider and meet this person. This can also shape the creative process from a minority perspective.
Thank you. We have another question. Oops, so there's two, one there and one over here. Maybe go this one first and then we'll come to you in a second.
Good afternoon. Very interesting talk, thank you. My question is the first money in. So as filmmakers, we know the hardest money is normally the first money in. So development funding, first money in. What is the panel's experience on raising funds in terms of crowdfund, a myriad of different strategies? Could you give your experience for the benefit of the audience of starting out and actually succeeding in doing that?
Well, certainly from Element's point of view, we're very lucky because we have very good relationships with BBC Film, Film 4, who've done all the Yorgos movies.
Screen Ireland.
And Screen Ireland, yeah. So I mean, again, one of the great things about being a European/UK film producer is there's a lot of public funding available for development,
Media as well, which is a part of
media, yeah.
Media was a big part. The media slate funding
that's right.
was really, really useful for September Says in the sort of pre-prep days.
So as I said, so it was developed in with BBC Film, and then BBC Film were the main financier of the project, you know.
Yeah, because just sorry to interrupt. I've got a lot of kind of conversation that we're talking about diversity, neurodiversity in terms of applications, but you don't really know that before you apply what kind of angle you should go for in terms of keeping the project organic in its art history, but also making sure that you get a good kind of successful opportunity with the right kind of team behind you, but also with the right, what they're looking for, the protocols they're looking for. Have you got any feedback on that?
I think you just have to go with what the heart of your project. I think if you try and, I hate this saying in many ways, but it's the perfect anecdote, square peg, round hole. If you try and make your project something that you think fits for someone else or something else, then it'll unravel. Whereas I think if you've got your project, and again, this is very much, talk about the co-production. You want to make the film as you want to make the film. You don't want to compromise. You want to make it the script that's written. I think you actually just need to. I mean, development money is hard, and sometimes you have to be prepared to write the script or write the pitch or write the film. But you need to, I think, know what you want to do with your vision rather than trying to kind of temper that to what you think someone else is, because you're only ever thinking what someone else's taste might be. You don't actually know.
Totally agree. Whenever I've tried to do this so-called like box ticking thing, and I've only tried it a couple of times, I think people see through it, and I've not had the funding. Anytime I've actually managed to get development funding from public funders, it's always been for projects that I ultimately really, really believe in passionately, and I think the pitch does come across on the page. So believe in your project, believe in the talent around you, and make others see that the potential success in it.
I think from a public funder perspective, even though the Global Screen Fund does not have development funding at present, completely agree with everything that was said by the panelists so far, but I think it's important to also understand what the parameters of the fund you might be applying for are, and just to see how to emphasize those elements of your project that speak to them. It doesn't work if you're trying to ram in elements that are not organic to the project, because you can see it in the application. So it's more about realizing what they're looking for, and attending events like these, reading their guidelines, their webinars, and trying to figure out, okay, what's been successful also in terms of funded projects, if there is a particular pattern or particular focus that the fund has. For us, it's very much international collaboration and audience potential in the Global Screen Fund. For other funds, it might be creative development of a certain, whether it's the writers, directors, it might be tied to the actual location of where most of the work is taking place. That should be something the funds can help guide you, but it has to be organic, because otherwise it doesn't really work. I think we had one question in the back, and we might be almost at time after that. Yeah.
I'm very curious to know if the both producers and funding bodies is concerned about, let's say, eternities of the movie or current political correctness. It means that, for example, Gone with the Wind is eternal movie. It was correct in his time. Right now is considered not so politically correct. And I want to ask, because I observed that most of movies right now, if you wish money, should be politically correct to the current politic, let's say. And if it will change it for sure in next 30, 40, 50 years, do you interested, or you just don't care, just now to pick up money, and then if people forget the movie after 1 year, there will be no problem? Thank you.
I mean, maybe this is just me, but I like this business because I want to live forever. I want my name up there forever, so I don't want it to disappear. As a producer, I'm very, very thoughtful and conscious of what I'm putting into the world and what message that's putting out into the world, and if that's a message that I feel in this space, in this time, is helpful if it's going to harm anyone. And I think that for, films that like Gone with the Wind that might have moved on in certain ways, I think context is key. I think there's nothing wrong with providing context for a film ahead of the film. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, look, before you go into this, there are some things that we don't believe in anymore. I think that helps enrich people's experience of the film rather than creating a barrier.
I mean, as the public body on this stage, I feel like I have to answer this question on behalf of all, excuse me, all public bodies, which I'm probably not very well equipped to do, but I will say that what we're looking for is mindfulness and awareness and thought that's gone into the film and the message that it's trying to put out there in the world. We do very much care about representation, about diversity and inclusion, but we also care about the story allowing for organic representation. And we care about supporting the filmmakers and achieving the best film possible. So it's very hard to, standing in where we are right now, to predict what might happen 10, 20 years in the future, but we know what's happening right now. So we expect the filmmakers to attempt to be mindful and to attempt to be aware of context, of circumstance. I think that's the most we can expect as a funding body. That a lot of decisions have to happen that are driven by budgets, that are driven by level of oversubscription, by whether this is the right time for this project. And we've had projects applying several times and being successful on the second or the third time, actually. And sometimes it's not so easy, and sometimes it's a better fund that's a better fit. So it's very hard to have a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, I think. I think that might be all we have time for today. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you to our panelists. Good luck in the post. Good luck with the premiere. We really appreciate your time.